All right, we have some breaking news out of college football where Oklahoma quarterback John Mateer will undergo surgery on Wednesday to repair a right hand injury. Now, it's unclear how much time he's going to miss, but Coach Brent Venables said he expects Mateer to return at some point this season. Mateer was injured in the first quarter of Saturday's win over Auburn, and the Sooners, they're off this week, so sophomore Michael Hawkins Jr. will start OU's next game on October 4th against Kent State. All right, we want to welcome in Josh Callaway here on HQ, our OU 247 sports reporter. So, Josh, what are you hearing about this injury for John Mateer, where now he's going to have surgery for it? What are you hearing?
Yeah, obviously just devastating news for Oklahoma here. Off to a great start to the season, 4-0, and John Mateer been obviously a huge part of that. Certainly right at the top of the Heisman conversation through the first month of the season. Hurt his throwing hand in the first quarter against Auburn on Saturday. It was a thumb injury, obviously on that right throwing hand. He played through it in that game, which can kind of explain a little bit of why he was a little bit of a slow start in that game, had a much better second half, found a way to get the Sooners over that hump, and obviously get that big win. But after coming back at it, looking at it, seeing how it bounced back the last couple of days, Oklahoma has decided we need to go ahead and get surgery on this, which is going to obviously sideline him for a little bit of time. I mean, like you said, the expectation is he'll be back this season, but obviously it's going to take 2-3 weeks, I would think at least, before John Mateer can get back out there. So for Oklahoma, it's a huge blow, obviously. I mean, the offensive turnaround from a year ago, the biggest reason for that is what John Mateer has done so far. He's been so impactful, obviously, in the passing game, but what he's done with his legs. And he's also the leader of this team. He's the face of the team and the squad right now, and has been a huge part of the success in the early part of this season. So for Oklahoma, they have to turn to Michael Hawkins now, who, did play a little bit last year, had a few starts in place of Jackson Arnold last season. So he has some experience, but is still a relatively raw player. Obviously doesn't have a lot of experience, but he'll get a chance to get out there and they'll see what he can do over the next few weeks as John Mateer is going to be out for a little bit while Oklahoma tries to weather the storm until he can get back.
I know you just mentioned him, but I want to talk more about Michael Hawkins Jr., who is going to be backing up Mateer. I know you said he did get some playing time last season, but based off of what you've seen or heard being around the camp so far this season, what can you tell us about him?
Yeah, well, he's an electrifying athlete, Michael Hawkins is. He can run with the best of them, and he did some nice things in his time as the starting quarterback last year. His first career start was at Auburn last year, and they won that game. He went on the road, first freshman to ever start on the road in the SEC for his first game, and they got the win. I mean, so he did some nice things last year, but there was also a reason why they went back to Jackson Arnold. He wasn't totally ready. Obviously, they felt like they needed to make a change to go back to Jackson, but Michael Hawkins stuck it out. He stayed here, and Brent Venables and this staff have spoken very highly of the progress he has made in year two under Ben Arbuckle. That, the back in the spring, they said he'd made more progress just in spring camp than he had his entire freshman season. And a big part of that was Ben Arbuckle. So Oklahoma thinks very highly of Michael Hawkins, and he is looked at in a lot of ways by many as being kind of that next guy in line after John Mateer, whether it was next season or further down the road, whenever that may be. So obviously that timeline has now been accelerated. He's going to be tossed into the fire right away. And the good thing for him is that the timing is pretty good, for as good as it can be for this sort of thing. They have the week off, and then they have Kent State at home next weekend. But then it's the Texas game, obviously on October 11th down in Dallas. And Michael Hawkins did start that game a year ago, and it didn't go well. Obviously, Oklahoma got blown out down there in Dallas by the Longhorns last year. So they'll be looking for a much different tune this time around. But Michael Hawkins is a guy that Oklahoma believes in, but it's certainly going to take some serious adjusting on their offensive kind of game plan and what's realistic to expect with Michael Hawkins as opposed to John Mateer, who's a veteran who has been in Ben Arbuckle's offense, obviously, for a number of years now. So there's some expectation, some excitement there. It's not throwing, a backup into the fire that has no experience or anything like that. It's a guy that has played and they do believe in, but he's a backup quarterback, right? I mean, it's a big step down from what they're used to with John Mateer, and a lot will be kind of put on Michael Hawkins' plate very, very quickly now going into the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, because to your point, in 2 weeks, it's that Red River rivalry. So how much different is that outlook if John Mateer is not ready to go for that?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously you're talking about, I think if the game were to be played this weekend, I would venture to say Oklahoma might be favored in that game against Texas, the way both teams have kind of started out the year. Now you would have to flip it, right? And that's not to disparage Michael Hawkins too much. Again, he did some nice things a year ago, but again, it's a guy that you're tossing in that is pretty unproven, doesn't have a lot of college experience. And you look at what John Mateer's done so far this year. Obviously, you're talking about the guy who's been, depending on who you ask, maybe the best quarterback in college football this year. So definitely makes things a whole lot tougher going against that Texas defense, which has been one of the best in the country through the first few weeks of the season. And you're now talking about a guy who's only has a handful of starts under his belt. Is just in his second year of college football. So, Ben Arbuckle will do everything he can to cater this offense around Hawkins. The good news is for Oklahoma is that their defense is playing obviously at an extremely high level. So it's not like you're looking for the offense to go put up 40 points every weekend to win. But that being said, you're going to have to find a way to create some big plays and get some points on the board down against a really good Texas defense in a couple of weeks. So, like I said, the one good thing about this, if there is any, positive spin you can put on it, is that the timing is as good as it can be with a bye week and then Kent State next week. So they have really, all due respect to Kent State, obviously, basically 3 weeks to get Michael Hawkins completely ready to go for that Texas game down in Dallas. So from that perspective, it gives you a little bit of hope. It's not, end of the world, like Oklahoma is completely doomed here, but obviously it's a huge blow. Anytime you lose your starting quarterback and a really good one at that, and John Mateer.
Yeah, but that bye week is everything, an extra week. I mean, it does matter. Yeah. Josh, we certainly appreciate it chatting with us here. That breaking news that we're following here on HQ out of college football, where John Mateer is going to have surgery on his right hand. That's also his throwing hand because of an injury. As mentioned, they are off this week. The Sooners, they're sitting at 4-0. They play Kent State on October 4th. And then again, it is the Red River rivalry on October 11th against Texas, where it doesn't seem like John Mateer is going to be ready, but that is the outlook that we're dealing with here as we're looking at the Sooners' schedule as they sit at 4-0. All right, we have more to discuss here for the Sooners. With John Mateer having surgery, what does this mean for the Sooners and their outlook in terms of the CFP? We're going to discuss it with Brad Crawford and Brandon Marcello coming up. All right, let's welcome in our college football analysts, Brandon Marcello and Brad Crawford. Guys, great to see you. Of course, we're thinking 12 steps ahead, right, in terms of the CFP and what this means for OU. So, Brad, I'll come to you first here. What does this mean if OU starts to kind of get behind in the SEC? They have Texas in a couple of weeks. How detrimental could that be towards their CFP outlook if they start getting behind here in Mateer's absence?
Yeah, the key factor for me, Jacqueline, is how significant is this wrist injury? Are we talking about a serious surgery where he's out a month? Is he out 3 weeks, maybe 6 weeks? Really, you want to see him return as fast as you can if you're an Oklahoma fan, because he's the straw that stirs this drink offensively. Now, in the CFP race, I think 10 wins is the magic number this season in the SEC to just about guarantee a playoff berth. Oklahoma plays the toughest schedule in the country. They've already got 2 ranked wins over Michigan and Auburn, and they've got about 3 weeks now before they play in Red River against Texas. If they can somehow win at least 2 of those 3 SEC games in October, Texas, South Carolina, and Ole Miss, without John Mateer, if they can win 2 of those 3, I think Oklahoma still sets up pretty well. If there is a team that can finish 9-3 in college football and still get to the playoff this season, it's OU because of those 6 ranked games left. That said, I would not count on that. I think Brent Venables and that staff know 10 wins is the magic number.
Yeah, for me, I think the big thing is they just got to get John Mateer back and healthy, back to himself before the game against Ole Miss on October 25th. That, to me, is the date you absolutely need to have him back, because the Texas game to me now is just a coin flip with Michael Hawkins in there at quarterback. Remember, Michael Hawkins didn't throw for more than 200 yards in 7 games last year until their bowl game, which they lost to Navy 21-20. He only threw touchdown passes in 2 of those 7 games, and that was from his first appearance to his last appearance, to the 7th appearance. So this is a situation where Michael Hawkins, he's played, he's a veteran, but he did not do very much last year. Now, there are better pieces around him this season, especially along the offensive front. Remember, last year, the reason why that offense struggles is because of the offensive line. He can run just like Mateer, but Mateer is worlds better than Mike Hawkins. They're going to have to play more ball control, I think, on offense, and they are going to have to lean on him as a runner. But Mateer's the type of player that would take over games. Against Michigan, he had to run the ball 19 times to secure a 10-point win. Against Auburn, John Mateer had to lay a drive down the field in the final minutes, not just through the air, but with this feet. He had a hard run, a 9-yarder, where he ran into the end zone, carrying people with him in the dive there. So Matier is everything to this team, but I think that because of the upgrades they made on the offensive line and the defense being a legit top 10 type unit, I think they will be okay going into Ole Miss on October 25th. They can afford to lose one game between now and that Ole Miss game. But if they don't have Matier back by then, that's when they could be in big trouble. Don't sound the alarms until they lose one game during this stretch.
And there is a report out there saying that he is expected to miss 1 month. That's what we're hearing the very latest. So, of course, they have a bye week. They have Kent State, and then they have Texas there the following week. So, Brad, I know you said, Brandon, they can afford to miss one game. But can they afford to miss the Texas game? Is that a must-win situation? I hate to throw that out so early, but what is really your outlook in terms of the CFP when that's obviously was a huge opportunity, a huge resume booster?
For me, listen, I think that with the schedule the way it sets up, they should beat South Carolina, no whomever the quarterback is on the road. They should beat Kent State here in a couple of weeks. Red River is on October 11th. And as we've seen in the past in the Red River rivalry, it's a weird game. It's one of the unique games in college football because you have the momentum depending on what side of the field you're on from one half to the other. That thing is 50-50. That has been the case for the last 10 years or so where you can see momentum shift from half to half in that game. Oklahoma's defense just needs to limit all those downfield throws from Arch Manning, make him uncomfortable. I know everybody's going, hey, Arch Manning looked a lot better this past week, but it was against Sam Houston. He has not looked good against anybody with a pulse this season. Oklahoma's going to be the best defense he's faced all season, in my opinion. And I've seen Ohio State in person against Texas, and I've seen OU in person twice. OU's defensive front will give him more fits than what he saw against Ohio State. I still, at this moment, even with Mike Hawkins at quarterback, still like OU in that matchup against Texas.
Yeah, just like Brandon said, I don't think this team can afford to lose more than a game in John Mateer's absence. Now, this is an elite defense, and they are going to have to play a methodical, different caliber team-type offense the next few weeks. John Mateer took way too many unnecessary hits early in the season, and now we see as a result of that, he's on the shelf for the foreseeable future. The big key for me, I'm writing a story tonight for CBS.com on just where this playoff path can sort of get for Oklahoma. If he misses the next 3 SEC starts, that's Texas at Red River, on the road against South Carolina, may not be a very easy game inside Williams-Brice, and then Ole Miss. If they go 1-2 in that stretch and then Mateer comes back for Tennessee, then there's no margin for error the rest of the way. And it's hard to imagine Oklahoma beating 4 ranked teams in November to get to that playoff spot with a 10-2 finish. So they've got to do all they can to go at least 2-1 after that win over Kent State here in a couple weeks in October to make sure they get back to the playoff.
Guys, I know we were just going to talk about CFP, but we obviously have to talk about the Heisman of it all, right? Because his odds have been taken off the board since this news came down. Brad, I'll come to you first here. How much time can he afford to miss if he's going to be out a month like that report is saying? What does his outlook look like to you at this point? Is it completely lost?
I wouldn't say he's totally off the board because he has beaten Michigan and Auburn and played pretty darn well in both those games, helping his team win in the fourth quarter. But if he misses 3 SEC starts, especially against 2 ranked teams, Texas and Ole Miss, it's going to be hard for him to make up ground unless he has, 15 touchdown passes over those last 4 games in November. And who knows how he's going to come back after this injury. Like, what's the pain threshold going to be on his throwing hand? Had this been his other wrist, maybe he could have been rushed back a little bit sooner. But this is a quarterback who, throws the ball really well downfield. So he's going to have to take a step back and kind of reassess, what he is as a player once he returns.
I think with him being out now, this opens things up maybe for a non-quarterback to potentially win it. Because right now we've all been talking about quarterbacks. Carson Beck, John Mateer, and now Francis Mendoza, who does lead the odds on most sports books to win the Heisman Trophy. Look out for someone else out there, kind of a dark horse candidate at this point. Maybe we even get a running back in there. Keep an eye on Missouri's Ahmad Hardy. I know Mizzou's not a sexy name right now, but if they go on a run and it's because of Ahmad Hardy, who co-leads the SEC right now, actually leads the SEC right now in rushing, and is second nationally with 600 yards. He's been the engine of that offense. If they can get some big wins, he's a name that can maybe sneak up there. But But the names to me to watch now going forward are going to be Carson Beck and Francis Mendoza, and mostly maybe Carson Beck because he's got some big opportunities coming up. Remember, Miami goes to Florida State here next week, and if he has a big game there, I believe Carson Beck will end up being the front runner heading into the midpoint of the season.
Certainly could be a Heisman moment for Beck. Brandon, Brad, we certainly appreciate it talking with us here on HQ about that breaking news out of college football where John Mateer is going to get surgery on his right hand, that is his throwing hand, because of an injury. There's a report out there saying that he could miss a month. We'll see. We'll keep you posted. And of course, the conversation continues. Our crew is certainly going to touch on this topic over on College Football Insiders. You can watch right now by scanning that QR code on your screen.